Emily laughed and leaned into my brother like nothing in the world could touch her. Jason wrapped an arm around her shoulders and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, I trust my wife completely. The table hummed with approval. Smiles. Nods. Relief. And I sat there frozen, because I knew her secret, and she was absolutely certain I didn't. She met my eyes across the table, just for a second. Calm. Confident. Untouchable. The look of someone who believes the truth is buried too deep to ever surface. When my mother joked about how lucky Jason was, Emily squeezed his hand and said, I have nothing to hide. Her voice didn't shake. Mine almost did. I felt the words press against my throat, begging to be released. But before I could speak, my aunt laughed and said, some people just love drama. Her eyes flicked toward me. A warning. Jason followed her gaze and frowned. Can we not do this tonight? He said. Emily doesn't deserve that. Emily smiled softly, the picture of grace. It's okay, she said. I know how she gets. The way she said it, gentle, patient, made it sound like concern. Like I was the unstable one. The room relaxed. The decision was made without a vote. I realized then how alone I was. I was sitting in a room full of people who loved me, listening to a lie they wanted more than the truth. Emily knew it too. She lifted her glass, confident, protected, certain her secret was still safe. And for the first time, I understood how easy it is for the truth to lose, when everyone benefits from pretending it doesn't exist. To everyone else, their marriage was untouchable. Jason and Emily were the couple people held up as proof that love still worked. They met young, built a life fast, and made it look effortless. The house, the careers, the coordinated smiles in every photo, it all screamed stability. At family gatherings, their names were shorthand for success. Be like Jason and Emily, my mother used to say. Emily knew exactly how to play her role. She praised Jason in public, laughed at his jokes, told stories that made him sound like the best husband in the world. She remembered anniversaries, hosted dinners, sent thank you notes. She wasn't just loved, she was admired. And admiration is powerful. It makes people defend you without being asked. Jason believed in that marriage with his whole chest. He talked about her like she was the smartest decision he'd ever made. When people joked about marriage being hard, he smiled and said, not when you marry the right person. No one argued with him. Why would they? Our family needed that marriage to be real. It was the good story we told ourselves. The evidence that we did something right. Questioning it felt like questioning the foundation we were all standing on. So when doubts brushed the surface, they were pushed away quickly. Labeled stress. Misunderstanding. Normal marriage stuff. Anything but a threat. Looking back, I see how carefully the image was protected, not just by Emily, but by all of us. Because believing in their marriage was easier than imagining what it would mean if it wasn't what it seemed. I didn't uncover the truth by spying or digging. It slipped out because I was close enough for Emily to forget her mask for a moment. Jason was traveling a lot that year, and Emily leaned on me more than usual. Coffee runs. Long talks. Complaints about how lonely marriage could feel. She framed it as honesty, as trust. I listened because I wanted to be supportive, because she was my brother's wife, and I believed that meant something. The first crack appeared one evening when we were out together, and she stepped away to take a call. I wasn't trying to listen, I just happened to be nearby. Her voice was different. Lower. Softer. Intimate in a way that didn't belong to a casual conversation. She laughed quietly, the kind of laugh meant for one person only. When she noticed me, she jumped, then smiled and said it was just work. Too quick. Too smooth. After that, things stopped adding up. Stories she told me didn't match the ones she told Jason. Plans shifted. Timelines blurred. When I asked harmless questions, she corrected herself without hesitation, like she'd rehearsed every version already. What convinced me wasn't one moment, it was the pattern. The guarded phone. The sudden privacy. The way she was always emotionally present somewhere else. I didn't want to believe it. I tried not to. But your body knows before your mind is ready to admit it. I realized the truth not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't unsee it anymore. Once you notice how carefully someone manages their reality, you start to understand why. Once I knew, the hints became impossible to ignore. They had always been there, scattered through ordinary moments, dismissed so easily that no one felt guilty doing it. Emily started canceling plans last minute, always with an explanation that sounded reasonable enough. A headache. A late meeting. A friend in crisis. Jason defended her automatically. She's overwhelmed, he'd say, and everyone accepted it because caring sounded kinder than questioning. Her phone was never out of reach. Face down on the table. Locked. Always buzzing when Jason wasn't around. The moment he entered the room, the screen went dark. I noticed. Others did too. They just chose not to name it. There were evenings she came home unusually energized, smiling to herself, distracted. Jason teased her about being in a good mood. She kissed his cheek and said she was just happy. No one asked why that happiness never seemed connected to him. At a family barbecue, I caught her stepping away from the group, standing with her back turned, typing quickly. When she saw me, her smile vanished for half a second before she slipped the phone away. Later, my mother mentioned it felt like Emily was distant lately. Then she shrugged and changed the subject. Every hint was filed under nothing. Normal marriage stuff. Stress. Privacy. Independence. The explanations were always ready, because they were more comfortable than the alternative. The truth wasn't invisible. It was inconvenient. And in our family, inconvenience was something you learned to ignore. By then, what I carried wasn't suspicion anymore. It was certainty. The kind that doesn't come with screenshots or messages you can slide across a table. Just a quiet, relentless knowing that sat in my chest and refused to leave. That was the cruel part. I had no proof anyone wanted. No undeniable evidence. Just patterns, inconsistencies, and the way Emily's explanations only worked if you didn't line them up next to each other. In our family, that wasn't enough. Knowledge without receipts was treated like imagination. I tried to argue with myself first. Told myself I was reading too much into it. That I was biased. That I didn't want to be the sister who couldn't accept her brother's happiness. But every time I convinced myself to let it go, Emily would say something that didn't match. Or Jason would repeat a story I knew wasn't true. And the certainty came back, heavier than before. I realized how defenseless the truth is when it can't be demonstrated. People don't want instincts. They want artifacts. And if you can't produce them, you become the problem instead of the liar pointing at. Emily seemed to understand that perfectly. She never left anything tangible behind. No messages on shared devices. No visible slips. She lived in the space where denial thrives. Where everything can be explained away if you're motivated enough to do it. Knowing without proof isolates you. It turns every conversation into a calculation. Say nothing and protect yourself, or speak and lose credibility you may never get back. I was trapped between honesty and survival. And the worst part was this. The longer I stayed quiet, the more impossible it felt to ever be believed. Knowing the truth didn't give me courage. It gave me fear. Once you understand how much people want the lie to be real, you start measuring every word. I played conversations in my head that I never had. Imagined Jason's face tightening in disbelief. My mother's disappointment. The way the room would slowly turn against me. The risk wasn't just being wrong, it was being alone. I tested the ground carefully. Small comments disguised as concern. Doesn't it seem like Emily's been distant lately? The answers came fast. Don't overthink. Marriage is complicated. Why are you so focused on her? Each response trained me to retreat a little more. What scared me most was how quickly I could see the outcome. No proof meant no protection. Speaking up without evidence wouldn't expose Emily, it would expose me. I would become the jealous sister. The dramatic one. The problem everyone needed to manage. Emily seemed to sense my hesitation. Around others, she was warmer with me than ever. Compliments. Smiles. Casual touches on my arm. It looked like kindness. It felt like a reminder, look how reasonable I am. Who do you think they'll believe? So I stayed quiet. Not because I doubted what I knew, but because I understood the cost of saying it out loud. Silence felt like self-preservation. But fear has a price. Every time I watched Jason defend her, every time the family praised their marriage, that price went up. I wasn't just afraid to speak. I was afraid of who I was becoming by not speaking at all. At first, no one told me outright to shut up. They didn't have to. The message came wrapped in concern, delivered gently enough to sound reasonable. My mother was the first. She pulled me aside one evening and said, "I know you care about Jason, but you have to let this go." Let this go, as if the truth were a phase I'd outgrow. When I tried to explain myself, she cut me off. "You don't have proof," she said quietly. "And without proof, all you're doing is hurting people." Others followed. An aunt warned me I was crossing a line. A cousin told me I was making things uncomfortable. Even my father, who rarely interfered, said, "Some things are better left unsaid." Every comment carried the same meaning. Peace mattered more than honesty. The pressure was subtle but constant. Invitations felt conditional. Conversations stopped when I walked into a room. I could feel people watching me, gauging whether I was about to say something wrong. I wasn't being protected, I was being managed. Emily never confronted me directly. She didn't need to. The family did the work for her. That's how effective silence becomes when it's collective. No villain. No orders. Just a shared understanding that I was the risk. They framed it as kindness, as maturity, as doing the right thing. But what they were really asking was for me to carry the weight alone so everyone else could stay comfortable. By then, silence wasn't a choice anymore. It was an expectation. And breaking it meant risking everything I still had left. I didn't realize how alone I was until no one was left to talk to. The pressure to stay quiet had done its job. People stopped checking in. Group chats went silent when I typed. Family plans were mentioned after they'd already happened. No one said I was being excluded, but I felt it everywhere, in the pauses, the careful politeness, the way conversations never went deeper than weather and schedules. At gatherings, I felt like a guest instead of family. Emily moved through the room effortlessly, laughing, touching arms, belonging everywhere at once. Jason stayed close to her, protective, proud. Watching them felt unreal, like I was the only one seeing a crack in a perfectly staged picture. When I tried to connect, truly connect, I was met with distance. Any hint of seriousness made people uncomfortable. They didn't want my thoughts, my concerns, or my intuition. They wanted me neutral. Safe. Quiet. The isolation wasn't dramatic. It was slow and clean. No confrontations. No arguments. Just the steady removal of intimacy. I was still invited, but not included. Still present, but not trusted. What hurt most was understanding why. I hadn't accused anyone publicly. I hadn't caused a scene. All I'd done was know something dangerous. And that knowledge made me a liability. The truth didn't free me. It cut me off. I was surrounded by people who loved me, yet I had never felt more alone. And in that loneliness, one thing became painfully clear. In this family, silence was the price of belonging, and I had already paid too much. The longer no one challenged Emily, the stronger her lie became. At first, she'd been careful, measured. Now she was bold. She talked freely about her marriage, about trust and honesty, about how lucky she and Jason were to have each other. Each compliment she received made her more confident. Each nod from the family reinforced the story she wanted them to believe. Jason became part of the lie without realizing it. He repeated her versions of events as facts. He defended her preemptively, like he could sense doubt in the air and wanted to smother it before it took shape. Watching him do that hurt more than anything else. The lie wasn't just hers anymore, it was living through him. Silence had taught everyone how to behave. Questions disappeared. Curiosity faded. What remained was a shared performance, polished and convincing. Emily thrived in it. She no longer watched her words around me. I was no longer a threat. Once you stopped speaking, people stopped worrying about what you might say. What terrified me was how normal it all felt. The family adapted to the lie like it was furniture, something you learn to walk around without thinking. That's how deception survives. Not through force or brilliance, but through time and cooperation. I understood then that silence doesn't freeze the truth. It gives the lie permission to grow. And the longer it grows, the more damage it prepares to do. I didn't plan to speak. I had trained myself not to. But there are moments when silence stops being neutral and starts becoming a betrayal. It happened during another family dinner, ordinary on the surface. Jason was talking about an upcoming trip Emily had supposedly planned around his schedule. He said it proudly, confidently, repeating details I knew weren't true. Emily nodded along, adding small touches to the story, adjusting it in real time. And for the first time, Jason hesitated. Just a pause. Barely noticeable. But I saw it. Something inside me snapped. I realized that if I stayed quiet now, I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was helping her rewrite his reality while he stood right there, trusting both of us. The fear that had kept me silent was suddenly outweighed by something worse, the thought of becoming complicit. My hands were shaking. My heart felt like it was pressing against my ribs. I could already hear the fallout in my head, the accusations, the disappointment, the looks. But I also knew this was the last moment where the truth still had a chance to matter. So I spoke. Not loudly. Not emotionally. I said, "That's not what happened." The room went still. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Emily froze, her smile faltering for the first time. Jason turned toward me, confused, searching my face. I knew then there was no going back. The silence that had protected the lie was gone. Whatever came next, I had crossed the point of no return. And for the first time in a long while, the truth wasn't alone anymore. Once the words were out, there was no way to contain what followed. Jason asked me what I meant, his voice tight, controlled in the way people sound when they're bracing for impact. Emily recovered quickly. She laughed softly and said I was mistaken, that I must have misunderstood. She reached for his hand, grounding him, steady as ever. The same calm, the same confidence. She still believed her secret was safe. I didn't accuse her outright. I couldn't. Instead, I started laying out what I knew carefully, painfully. Dates that didn't line up. Nights she claimed Jason was home when he wasn't. Calls taken in private. Stories that shifted depending on who was listening. I spoke slowly, giving her space to interrupt, to correct, to smooth things over like she always had. She did. At first. But something was different now. Jason wasn't defending her automatically. He was listening. His brow furrowed, confusion replacing certainty. Confusion is dangerous to a lie. Then he pulled out his phone. He checked his calendar. Travel confirmations. A photo timestamp from a weekend Emily had rewritten completely. Small, ordinary details, nothing dramatic on their own. But together, they formed a shape Emily couldn't explain away. The room felt heavy. My mother covered her mouth. My father stared at the floor. Emily went very still. Not angry. Not hysterical. Just frozen, like someone who's run out of versions. She didn't confess. She didn't need to. The truth assembled itself quietly, piece by piece, until there was nowhere left to hide it. The secret didn't explode. It collapsed. And in that collapse, everything we'd built around it fell too. The truth didn't settle in the room the way I thought it would. It didn't bring clarity. It brought shock and then denial, thick and desperate. No one spoke at first. Jason stared at the table like it might rearrange itself if he waited long enough. My mother kept shaking her head, whispering, "No, this doesn't make sense," as if logic could be negotiated. My aunt broke the silence by saying, "There has to be an explanation," already searching for a softer version of reality. Emily cried. Quietly. Carefully. Not with panic, but with precision. Tears that didn't come with words, just enough emotion to make people uncomfortable with the idea of blaming her. Someone reached for her shoulder. Someone else sighed and said, "This is all happening too fast." Denial became collaborative. They questioned timelines, dismissed coincidences, reframed facts as misunderstandings. The same people who had demanded proof now argued about what proof meant. Because accepting it meant admitting they'd helped protect a lie. Jason stood up abruptly and left the room. The door closing echoed through the house, loud and final. No one followed him. Facing the truth alone was easier than facing each other. I expected relief. Vindication. Something that felt like justice. Instead, I felt hollow. The truth was out, but it hadn't healed anything. It had only exposed how fragile everything was and how hard people fight when the lie has already shaped their lives. Shock fades slowly. Denial lingers longer. And in that space between them, families decide who they're willing to lose to keep believing what feels safe. The change didn't happen with apologies or dramatic realizations. It happened in the way people started looking at me. Conversations slowed when I spoke. Not to shut me down, but to listen. The same relatives who once told me to let it go now asked quiet questions, careful not to challenge what I said. No one admitted they'd been wrong. Instead, they offered softer phrases. I guess you were noticing things we didn't. You always were more observant. Emily was no longer the center of the room. People were polite, but distant. The warmth she once carried so effortlessly had cooled into something cautious. Every word she said seemed to hang in the air a second too long, waiting to be tested. Trust, once cracked, doesn't snap back into place. Jason barely looked at her. When he did, it wasn't with anger, it was with disbelief, like he was still trying to recognize the person he'd married. When his eyes finally met mine, there was no accusation there. Just exhaustion. And something close to understanding. What unsettled me most was how quickly the family rewrote the story. There were signs, someone said. I always felt something was off. The same signs they dismissed when I named them. I had become the one who knew all along. Not by choice, but by necessity. Being believed didn't feel like victory. It felt like grief. Because the truth hadn't just changed the roles. It had exposed how easily they could be changed. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They unfolded slowly, unevenly, like damage revealing itself after the storm has already passed. Jason stopped coming around. When he did, he looked smaller somehow, like the certainty he used to stand on had been pulled out from under him. He and Emily were talking, then taking space, then no one used words at all. The silence around their marriage was no longer protective, it was hollow. Emily lost something she couldn't rebuild. Not immediately and not publicly. But the ease was gone. The unquestioned trust. The benefit of the doubt. People were polite, careful, distant. Every story she told now carried a pause, an unspoken, is that true? Reputation doesn't shatter loudly. It erodes quietly. Our family changed in ways no one acknowledged out loud. Conversations became cautious. Trust felt conditional. Some relationships never recovered. Others survived, but thinner, strained by what had been exposed. There was a before and an after, and everyone felt it. As for me, I wasn't celebrated. I wasn't punished either. I became a reminder of what happens when silence stops working, of how much damage can exist before anyone is willing to look at it. There were nights I wondered if it had been worth it. The fallout was real, but so was the cost of staying quiet. Families don't break because someone tells the truth. They break because of what the truth reveals. I've thought a lot about what this cost me and what it taught me. For a long time, I believed that being doubted meant I was wrong. That if enough people dismissed what I saw, then maybe I should too. But this experience taught me something harder and more honest. Disbelief doesn't come from lack of truth. It comes from the inconvenience of it. Families don't reject the truth because it's unclear. They reject it because accepting it would force change. It would require courage, confrontation, and loss. Silence feels kinder. Safer. But it's only a delay, not a solution. If you're the person who knows something everyone else is avoiding, understand this. The loneliness you feel isn't proof that you're mistaken. It's proof that you're early. Truth is almost always isolated before it's accepted. Speaking up may cost you comfort, relationships, and your place in the room. Staying quiet may cost someone else their reality. Neither choice is painless, but only one of them is honest. I don't regret telling the truth. I regret how long I believed I needed permission to say it. Because being doubted doesn't mean you're wrong. Sometimes it just means the truth threatens something people are desperate to protect.